Hello. Hey, thank you for joining us. I'm hanging out with my good friend Keith Riddle. We're going to talk about how Keith got started in real estate, what his real estate investment strategy is, because he's a licensed broker, a real estate entrepreneur, and kind of where he sees things going and how he's making money doing it today. So, Keith, we've known each other a long time, brother. How did you get started in real estate? What brought you into our crazy business?
Yeah. Well, first, thank you for having me, Anton. Always love talking shop. So nice to be here. My origin story is probably, I don't know, somewhere similar to like The Wolf of Wall Street or something. Movie excerpt. I was literally I was still in college, almost out of college, and I was just at a bar with a buddy. He'd gotten into real estate, and I was like
Yeah.
just busting his chops and was like, "Hey man, are you making any money? How
Yeah.
do you like it?" And he pulled a check out of his pocket and like slid it across the table, and I grabbed it off the table and was like, "Where did you get this?" Right? And it was a check for, I don't know, maybe like 15 grand or something. But to a college kid who was working, odd jobs and going to school still, and I think I was like a junior or senior in college, it was more money than I had in my bank account by far. So I literally was like, how do I sign up for this? And so I studied online, got a license, and the rest is history.
Same, man. Same, brother. I was addicted to the commission. What year was that when you got into the business?
That was circa 2000, and I think it was 2004. And I got licensed and sold my first house in like January of 2005. So I basically studied over summer to get
Yeah.
my real estate license, and then sold my first house. And I was studying to be an engineer, a
Oh,
mechanical engineer. And I think I always say this, but I think my mom cried when I told her, like, I was ready to quit college, bro. I was like, I'm like, dude, no, I'm not doing this. And, at the urging of her and some good counseling, they were like, you got to finish. And so I ended up like counting up my credits and walking with like a philosophy degree or something, like whatever the fastest thing I could find was.
that's awesome.
But yeah, I fell in love with it, and obviously, the commission checks was what grabbed my attention. But really, once I was in it, it was the people, it was the art of the deal, it was just the
Yeah.
excitement around helping people buy a home or sell a home, and the commission's just the byproduct of that. But and then it doesn't hurt to be kind of good at it, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's an understatement. So you run a gigantic business. You sold an unbelievable amount of real estate. So let's go into that. Like, what were some of the biggest challenges in building your real estate business? And then explain to people, like, what you've done and how big this has actually gotten.
Yeah, I mean, Reader's Digest version is I started as a solo agent, and I kind of worked for a guy on a team, and I was basically a buyer's agent. I worked the buy side of the transaction only. He was like a lead listing specialist. Did that for a couple of years. Ended up working a buyout with him. He was relocating, and so I started at 26, 27 years old, building a team, and I kind of inherited half a team from him. And the biggest challenge was just like personal development and growth. Like I don't know that I was ready to be like a business leader or have my own people that I was responsible for or was responsible to,
Yeah.
type thing. So that was the start of it, and then essentially after that it was like all the minutia of owning a business. So for example, like taxes and books, and I just wasn't mature as an adult and ready for that kind of stuff.
And I think that really happens to so many of us that start, because you're in your 20s when you started. I was in the same boat. So as I started, I was just young, dumb, and immature. There was no way around it. Where did your business get to?
Yeah, so I started with myself and I think three other agents and an admin staff, and essentially built it to a large team of about 12 or 15.
Yeah.
Launched that into an independent brokerage, and I think at the peak of my independent brokerage operation, I had 156 agents, 9 staff. We're selling over about 1,500 homes a year, and really, I think this year, next year marks my 20th year in the business. So it's been about 20 years. And somewhere along the line got involved in real estate investments. And that's a whole nother story, I suppose.
So you were a solo agent, you're building a team, and then you built a very big business, brother. And I know that you don't like to talk about it, but give me the Reader's Digest version of the business that you built.
Yeah, for sure. It's not that I don't enjoy talking about it. I just feel like I've told this story and people, it's like I should tell a different story, but I guess it's my story. And I essentially, I think the biggest thing I can give tribute to my success to was probably the beginning of what was an online revolution in real estate, to set the scene a little bit, right? Technology was in place. But the consumer really didn't have the ability to search much on their own. This was pre-Zillow. And it was really at the beginning of also like Google search and just search engines. I mean, the prevalent search engine when I got into real estate was still AOL. And so when Google came around and when YouTube came around and when Zillow came around, being kind of a young techie or college kid who was, studying engineering and could actually click a mouse and type on a keyboard, I started using this thing called the internet. And so I would go around and I would placate to the older seasoned agents in my office as a young agent. And the script would sound something like, hey, Sally, you're amazing. I hope someday I can be the agent that you are. You sell a ton of houses. I'm just this young kid. I'm trying to figure it out. Hey, I don't know if you've heard about this thing called the internet. But I would love to promote your listing on the internet and potentially bring you a buyer. And if I could bring you a buyer, maybe we could work together on a cross sale. And if not, no worries. You can just brag to your sellers that you're doing some extra marketing on the internet and getting them more exposure for their house. And so for the most part, like a lot of the older agents they were like, sure, kid, whatever, man. Like, here's some pictures and some verbiage, And so I basically started the kind of like online lead generation before it was really a thing, like no CRM, no fancy bells or whistles. I literally just had a library of Word documents and pictures, and I was posting Craigslist ads. I was posting on a lot of free forums and just leading people's inquiries back to my email.
Yeah.
And that allowed me to leverage into a team. I was getting so many inquiries and so many people responding that I was like tapping people on the shoulder in my office saying, hey, do you want some leads? Hey, can you call these people back? Hey, can you respond to this email? And if you do and something comes out of it, we'll figure it out. We'll tag team it.
And that turned into a massive business for you.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, and I don't want to be braggadocious, but I just don't think anybody was doing it at the time.
Yeah.
And so doing lead generation at a large scale was something that I think before was small scale. It was a lead listing specialist with a lot of signs out there and using some real estate magazines. And they were able to float or keep one or two buyer's agents busy, maybe. I at one point in time had 9 buyer's agents, 10 buyer's agents, and me and my another gentleman were the full-time listing specialists. And so I built a team of 12, 10, 14, and that was unheard of, right? In the office that I was in at the time, that really was kind of promoting teams, the Keller Williams office in Spokane. A lot of the teams were 3 people, husband-wife team, 4 people. And here I was, this young kid with 14, 15, and got a lot of guff for that too, But that was the advantage to internet lead generation.
And then you went and built your own brokerage after that. How big did that get to?
So when I started my independent brokerage, it was basically my team at the time, which was about 12 agents and 2 administrative staff. So there's 14 of us. And over the course of about 5 years, built it from 12 to about 150 real estate agents and about 9 staff at that point. And it was just one of those things where it grew, and I think it grew primarily because of the market itself. Real estate just gotten hot. A lot of people were getting into real estate. So when you start to have agents that are successful, their friends see them, their families see them, their clients that they work with say, hey, I might want to take a crack at real estate. So I really attribute a lot of my growth to this organic growth of the market. And then absolutely like just my stellar leadership ability, Anton. So
I watched you grow through that process, so I know that you're playing this down and being, humble here. But you grew massively as an individual and as a leader. So who were your big mentors as you were growing your business, and what did they help with?
I had a very fortunate to have a slew of really good mentors. I would say, two of my first mentors were the guy named Eric Peterson, who was my initial team leader. Eric still sells real estate today, sells a lot of it. And I was a buyer's agent for him. And he, as far as teaching me the ins and outs of real estate and the art of the deal and negotiation, huge hats off to Eric. He just taught me how to do it right. He taught me how to hold deals together, how to put deals together, how to smooth out the peaks and valleys of all the minutia that goes into doing a real estate deal, from appraisals to inspections to all that. Another mentor I always mention is a guy named Bruce Hardy. Bruce Hardy was the owner of my office, and he's kind of a legend in the real estate, at least the Keller Williams world where I grew up in, kind of, so to speak, the playground that I grew up in. And Bruce was just a very motivating, very inspiring guy, always complimentary of me and my team. And being a young guy, I caught a lot of flack, I would say, in my local market initially early on. You're a hotshot kid coming up, doing a lot of deals, building a big team. And Bruce was always like, "No, man, go get them. You're amazing. You're great." And he had an Australian accent, which is cool. And he told great stories. So I always appreciated Bruce. And then outside of that, I would say two other big contributors. One was Gary Keller, the founder and owner and CEO of Keller Williams Realty. I mean, I got to sit, and I think that's actually how we probably met, Anton. I got to,
yes, sir.
Got to sit in Gary's, top 100 mastermind group at a young age, being a young kid, and just listening to a guy who was so many light years ahead of us, talking to us about, things that I was thinking about lead generation in my next deal, and he's talking to me about the person I want to be, and, leadership and growth and human development. And being a guy who had a little bit of a philosophy background, I did graduate with a philosophy degree. I love that, man. I ate that up like hook, line, and sinker. I mean, for someone to talk to me about like the bigger picture of all of this, whether it's investments or team building or growth or people, just the human aspect of it was so amazing. So hats off, I wouldn't be where I am without those three people. And the last thing that I would really say is just lending myself to coaching and personal development as a person. Like I've had a coach or had a variety of coaches, business coaches over the years, and you pay for it. I'm paying people thousands of dollars a month to coach me, to coach my business, to coach where it's at. And that's something that initially it was not welcome. I was like, man, I'm going to pay this person thousands of dollars to tell me what I already know or to help, but it really made a big difference over time. I think, time on task over time, if you lend yourself to having a coach, somebody who gets up in your grill, in your business, you're honest with your personal development, it doubles, it triples, it compounds over time.
Amen, brother. And so now I want to switch gears. I want to go into investment strategy. What would you say your approach is for identifying investment properties? And then maybe even walk through a little bit of, hey, I built a big business, I've sold or transitioned into that, and now I'm doing a little bit more investing. What's that look like? Because I know a lot of real estate brokers, they get there because they get tired of the rat race of the constant, hey, we're just doing the transaction.
Yeah. I mean, the investment, I started investing pretty early, and I did it for no other reason than I could. And what I mean by that was I was fairly handy. I grew up on a farm. I had uncles that kind of worked construction. And so I knew how to do that stuff. I was by no means a skilled craftsman, but I wasn't afraid to like tear off a roof or build a deck or do stuff like that. And so I think I naturally just had a skill set that would lend to me doing some flipping. So I very early on got into buying my first flip or my first project. And it was really just for fun and for excitement. And because I worked with a lot of real estate investors. So it doesn't take long as a young real estate agent. When you sell a guy a house and then he's back on your office conference room listing paperwork, 6 months later, and you watch him make $30,000, and then you do it again, and then you do it again, and you're like, wait a minute, I've literally just sold this guy, 3 or 4 deals and watched him make $90,000 in the last year. Why am I not, doing this as well? And so it was just a natural evolution to get into.
What year did you buy your first investment in then?
So the first 2 years in the business, I didn't really screw around. I was just kind of learning the business. I didn't have a ton of capital. So that would have been like 05, 06. So it was probably like 07, 08, where I bought my first investment. And that's about when the market started tanking, pretty good. So maybe it was because there was more deals around. But yeah, so it was in the downturn. And looking back now, I'd love to say, again, it was this big grand plan, but it really wasn't. It was a crime of opportunity. And Do you remember the first time homebuyer tax credit that came out? I think it was like, oh, I don't know if that was 08 or 09, like Obama enacted the first time homebuyer tax credit.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
First house I ever flipped, man. It was like with a buddy who could get a loan. And I'm like, hey, did you know you could get $8,000 if you buy a house? And I think we kind of like, did a handshake tag team type deal. He would buy a house and I would help him do the renovations and front some repairs. And yeah, that was really the creative start of it. And then that spurred into, like, I alluded to with my real estate career, it just spurred into a love for it. Once you start realizing you have a skill at something, you can be successful at something, then it was like, hey man, how many of these can I do? And I really started focusing my energy. And again, this is a Keith that has no wife, no kids, is not in college anymore, and is making money in real estate. And so I also just had like a ton of like time on my hands and not a lot of other obligations. And so I was used to going to school all day and then working on nights and weekends to make ends meet, right? Like bartending or waiting tables or working on my family's farm. So for me, it was like working all day in the real estate office. And then after the office was over, going to a flip and tearing out sheetrock or, hanging doors and trim. It was just kind of, I was in my late 20s, I was having fun and working a lot of hours, but didn't feel like work. And so I was able to build this kind of on the heels of just keeping myself out of trouble, maybe was a better way to put it.
And so how's your investment strategy evolved over time? So it kind of sounds like, you were selling real estate, so you're helping others, do some investing. So you start doing some flips to copy them. Well, then what changed over time? How has your strategy evolved?
So it started with flipping. It was the quick, easy buck, right? And I don't know, easy is the right word, but it was, buy a house, fix it up, sell it for more than you paid for and what you put into it. That ultimately ended up meaning two things. One is I was accruing capital that I could utilize later on to buy more long-term holds, properties that I intended to cash flow, keep as a rental. I was also reading a ton of books at the time, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Cash Flow Quadrant, kind of like getting the hint that, hey, there's a lot of money in holding properties long-term. But it also meant something else. And the other thing that it meant, which probably was the biggest deal, was screw ups. And so I always tell people, and this is the God's honest truth, my first 4, 6, 8 rentals were flips that I screwed up or that I didn't do my numbers correctly or that the market shifted. And so, hey, now I have 8 doors. You're like, oh, you have 10 real estate doors. You're amazing. I was like, no, I've just screwed up 10 flips that bad. And I'm forced to now hold these things. So they were literally non-cash flowing. Some of them even had negative cash flow. Like,
Yep.
I was renting them for $800 a month and my payment was $950 a month. And I was feeding them at $150 a month. Now I really better be selling houses or doing other flips well because I've got negative cash flow properties. But what I underestimated at the time, and one of the things that I tell new agents now is the hold for me is where it's at. If I had to go back and do it over again, I'm not saying flipping's bad, but even one of those screw ups or some like a property that I held for 15 years at this point or 20 years is going to make me so much more money and be so much less work and less hassle and less risk than the short-term flip game. I wish I'd have held more properties earlier. I really do. And if I was an agent or even an investor starting out, I would probably just say, man, just hold a door a year. If you could make a goal of just holding one door a year, 10 years from now, you're going to look up and have wealth that you never dreamed of just through those 10 properties that you were able to hold one a year. And I was running around like a chicken with my head cut off and my pants on fire, trying to just turn and burn and do all this stuff and holding bad ones. But long-term wealth accrual through the holding of real estate is, in my humble opinion, the single best tangible reach of an investment for any person, real estate agent or not. And that's how much I believe in it.
Amen. No, sold. 4,000% agree. So you start flipping, mess up some flips, so you end up making some holds, and we all did it. And we all had the negative cash flow dogs or things of that nature. And then your investment strategy evolved again. So where's it moved to now? Because you've got some things on the wall behind you, and you and I have had some great conversations. So what's changed even now more than, hey, I just want to hold long term?
I think it's a natural evolution to some extent. And as a real estate agent and broker, maybe our natural evolution scales faster than most people's because
Mm.
we're just so entrenched in the market. But for me, I watched a local kind of real estate legend in my market. It was a guy named Bob Tomlinson, who built a very successful brokerage and later on merged it in, I think, with Coldwell Banker. But long story short, as a kid, I remember seeing their signs everywhere before I ever knew I was going to be an agent or in real estate. But he had this kind of thing that he did that I figured out really easy or a lot later. That was, he basically developed land. He was the guy who was 5 years in front of the market or 10 years in front of the market. He would buy a big swaths of land. He would plat them. He would develop the land. He would basically partner with builders or negotiate with builders that he would sell them the lots that he had developed. And then it would list the new construction properties back with his firm. And it wasn't like rocket science. It wasn't hard to see from a distance, but it's not easy to do. And so, you have to be in front of the market. You have to have capital. You have to have foresight. You have to pretty much be involved, I think, politically, at least communally, to know what, does community want this product? Do they not? Can you push these sort of projects through? But yeah, man, Bob Thompson was a guy who was a big inspiration to me, and it was something that I always strived for, but just wasn't in my grasp and wasn't on my radar until I was kind of ready. But land development for me was something that was like, hey, if you want to play the game end to end in the real estate world, right? Supply and demand, it's all about product type thing. Well, then create the product. And creating the product of a house, of the bricks and mortar, really starts even before that with the product of the land, right? Who has the land? Is it subdividable or developable? What are the ins and outs of that? City, county, zoning. I mean, all of this kind of stuff that, I picked your brain about, Anton. I have a ton of respect for you. And that was to me always fascinating. And so I think in the back of my mind, I knew that's where I was headed. And so I just started collecting information that way. And what it's turned into today is that, yeah, I would say the bulk share of my time is spent managing my investment portfolio, the current doors and properties that I have. I'm currently building a 62-unit new construction apartment complex that's attached to some other commercial property I own. And I'm basically focused on land development for single-family residential and multifamily development. Where's the market going in Spokane and in Eastern Washington? That's really what I'm keyed in on, North Idaho. And I'm trying to basically help create the product, right? Start to finish.
Oh, amen, brother. So what I want everyone to hear is, by controlling the front end of the product, of the assembly line, by basically, if you have the land, you control the deal. Now, if I have the land, then I can make a decision. Is this something I'm going to hold? Is this something I'm going to flip? Is this something I'm just going to lightly entitle? It creates massive options. And then, because Keith and I are also both licensed real estate brokers, we can always just be the investor on the front end on the land, sell it to a builder or developer, and then just get a bunch of listings to sell too. So there's multiple exit strategies here. What in land development right now is most exciting or most intriguing to you that you're paying attention to in that kind of Spokane, Eastern Washington, Idaho area?
The biggest thing and the most exciting thing, and I've heard you talk about it, and for those of people that have not keyed in on it, I would say key in on it. But it's that middle housing bill, right? It's the Washington Senate passed the middle housing bill, which is really, I think, reshaping development. It's about creating more density. It's about creating middle housing, and I think that all of a sudden now there's what I would call a reevaluation of a lot of the land that I've already previously evaluated, or that a lot of people have previously evaluated. So when you get into development, what you realize is it's a small game. It's a big game with very few people, right? And a lot of people, like first thing I ever did, right, was lay out a big map of my area and start to look at the long-term growth plan, right?
Yep.
What's the long-term growth plan look like in my community? What have the cities and municipalities already said they're going to do in the future, or that they're probably going to do? And you kind of go through the entire map and you're like, okay, here's the target areas, right? Here's the key areas I can focus in on. Now with the new passing of this middle housing bill, it's like, oh my gosh, we got to go back to square one. I got to relook at this entire map, because there's all these things that I think that maybe been overlooked or passed over because, that'll never happen there, or that this place is kind of played out. And all of a sudden it's like, well, no, not now. Like, not if density increases the way that it could. And I think there's still a lot of question marks around it. As far as the cities and the municipalities have some time from when Senate passed the middle housing bill, can't just be effective the next day, but they basically say, hey, you have to abide or you have to meet this criteria of these guidelines to create this sort of density in these areas. But they have some latitude about how they want to do it, right? They might not universally say, oh, anywhere in the city you can now build a fourplex on a single family residential lot like that. They could say that, but they might not say that. Or detached ADUs is a lot of things that I know you've talked about or we've talked about, or ADUs. So it's like all of a sudden it's like everything is kind of in the air as far as reevaluation. And there's a little bit of holding as to like, okay, what's the city going to do? What's the city of Spokane Valley going to do? What's the county going to do? So I would say it's created some chaos. Yeah. And in the midst of chaos is always opportunity. And so that's unnerving, and it's also kind of exciting. So I would say I've been like reinvigorated a little bit in the last year. I'm like, oh, cool, more problems, right?
I think, brother, we are going through a land development gold rush in Washington State. And what I mean by this is in the early 2000s, we had the Condominium Act, we had LDMR, we had some things come through that fundamentally changed the game. But this is the only major piece of legislation that's come through that now fundamentally changes the game again. And you said it so eloquently. So this is what I want our listeners to get, our subscribers to get, is as a change happens, Keith is following the change and watching it come through the city, watching it come through the county, making input in regards to those changes, following what they're logging at the city, logging at the county, because that's going to give him his unfair competitive advantage. Land development is always about market knowledge and then understanding the intricacies of how it's going to come to fruition in your area, which allows you to be a forward thinker, be ahead, like Gary helped us with back in the day, looking into the future onward. What's your future version of yourself look like? With land development, that's about understanding it. So we've already put land under contract today that penciled today as a duplex lot. Okay. And then in middle of next year, so it pencils today, then if next year it becomes a fourplex lot or becomes a sixplex lot, it just takes that double and turns it into a triple or maybe even a home run in some cases because of that opportunity. So that's super wise, brother. I love it. What I want to go to next is you had a real estate business and I shouldn't say have a real estate business. You're a real estate business owner. You're an investor. What's the trouble that you've run into scaling and also trying to scale both? And then how did you overcome that?
Well, I guess the first assumption is that I've overcome it. So I'm not 100% sure I've overcome it completely. But I think that hindsight's, I would just speak to like a younger Keith. A lot of times I tell even my people when I talk at like a team meeting or a mastermind, I say, hey, just so you guys listen, when I get fired up and I start doing my soapbox thing, just understand that like Keith is talking to like a younger Keith. Like Keith is saying to a younger version of Keith, like this is what I wish I would have known type thing. I'm not necessarily coming down on you or trying to berate you, but building a real estate business is super hard. And like I said, it goes back to personal growth and development for me. And building an investment portfolio is not easy either. And I think that managing the two is always interesting because it's a lot of the same problems in a different format. I'm gonna run into contractors on the renovation side or the investment side that are not doing what they said they're going to do in the time frame they said they were going to do it, right? Like these are not new problems. They're like as old as the day is long, but it's like it's managing people, it's managing expectations, it's managing schedules and timelines. And you get into the minutia of a real estate transaction, and it's like said, you got all these things going on. You got client expectations on the buy side or on the listing side. You got another agent you're dealing with. You got a home inspector, an appraiser. You got a lender. You got a title company, and it's like timelines get missed or people, communication is the biggest thing, between parties. So I think a lot of it's the same, and just mastering your ability to lead in any format. What I tell a younger agent and what I was told by Eric Peterson is like, Keith, in any situation, someone's in control, or at least somebody's leading the shots. And you have to decide, Do you want to be that person, or do you want that to be somebody else?
Yeah.
And as a young agent, I think I was kind of like the coach put me in guy. I was like, no, I want to be that guy. And sometimes later you're like, man, why did I agree to be this guy? But it's true, And so you get into a hairy cross sale, or you get into a hairy investment deal, and you're either going to be victim to the bank or the banker, or you're going to be victim to the situation, or you're going to be victim to the other agent who's calling the shots, or you're going to be victim to a irrational client who's demanding things, and you're going to sit there and you're going to take it and be a bystander, or you're going to take the reins. You're going to get, you say, hey guys, I know this is money, but this is what we're going to do. This is the plan. Like, here's a way out for all of us, or, I want to run this past you. And so I think really becoming a problem solver, but being able to step up, and whether you have the knowledge or the confidence in the moment to solve the problem quickly or perfectly is irrelevant to, you're going to be the person who makes the conscious decision to lead everyone along the path. And I think that for me is just, it's very hard to teach. It's very hard to relay, and it's not natural for most people, right? I always have this saying of like, be aware of your 7-foot tallness. And what I coined this phrase from was, I got a buddy of mine that I play hockey with. I play rec hockey with my brothers in like an old man beer league type thing. And one of my buddies, his name's Ryan, and he's like 7 feet tall. He's a very, very tall dude. And we were talking in the locker room one day, and he was kind of lamenting about how, like, anytime he's in social circles, people are always like asking him if he played basketball, or, hey man, like, where'd you play ball, or did you play college ball? And he's always like, I don't, he's like, why do they always assume I play basketball? And it's like, well, dude, because you're 7 feet tall, right? Like, that maybe that's why. But I think what's interesting to me is, like, for a guy who's to put this in perspective, is like, 5'8", like, I never have a shot at play. No one's ever coming up to me and being like, hey Keith, where'd you play ball? Like, not a question I get asked. But I don't have this innate God-given special talent of being 7 feet tall, right? And if I did, I'm sure people would ask me that question. But I think that is a very physical example. But in life, we all have those things. We have those things that come natural to us, that come easy to us. And they're kind of our 7-foot tallness. Now, like my buddy Ryan, he's a great hockey player. He's got great reach. He can reach around guys with his stick. And it's amazing to watch him play hockey. But he chose not to play basketball, which is fine. Yeah. But he had that gift if he wanted it. I did not. There's a good chance I'd never be in the NBA, right? I don't think there's a person in the NBA who's 5'8". So it doesn't matter how bad you want it. Doesn't matter how much you want to work towards it. There's just certain things that are in your realm or not. And so I think that as far as the 7-foot tallness, what I learned at a young age was that I had that in myself. I had the ability to take control of a situation, look at it from all angles. And really, I would say the biggest thing was run into the unknown without a solution, and do it with confidence, and do it with poise, and do it over and over and over again, and think without fear. Not that you were never nervous or scared or afraid, but like, I'm not going to let the fear deter me from doing the next thing that I think I need to do to remedy or fix this situation or to move the ball forward. Most people, it's that fight, flight, or freeze scenario. Fear gets injected to a situation. People will, fight, flight, or freeze. Well, fighting doesn't do any good. Fighting the situation, fighting the reality doesn't do any good. Fighting with other people doesn't do any good. And running from it, a lot of, I said, buyers bail on earnest money, or sellers just say, I don't want to sell my house anymore, or lenders, I can't do the loan. So the fight and the flight, and then the freeze, that doesn't do anything either. Like the freezing is just, somebody else please solve this problem for me. That's a I don't want to be in charge. I'm now victim to this situation like everyone else. Somebody else please solve this for me. And so that fight, flight, or freeze is a real thing. And I think I had the 7-foot tallness of being like, I'm not doing any of those. I'm going to be the guy who keeps on moving, keeps on looking for a solution, and keeps on pushing. And as much as I can stand at a mastermind or in an office setting or in an investment seminar and tell this to people, that is not something that I found that a lot of people can just do. So I think I'm fortunate in that aspect, but I also would tell people, like, if you want to be a successful agent or kind of navigate the art of a deal or an investor, I think there's an aspect of that you need to know either you have innately or that you can develop. You need to develop that skill.
Yeah. And that skill usually costs time, money, energy, experience. Bumps, bruises.
Yeah. It
Um,
doesn't always work out. I'm not saying it always works out, right? There's been plenty of times, and I think no person who's done investments long term, and no investor can tell you that they never lost. And I've had some doozies, man.
yeah, let's go there, because this is always good too, because what happens is people just assume the winners always win. What's been one of your worst losses? How did it happen? How could we tell our listeners to avoid that mistake? What should they know?
Well, with every strength becomes weakness, I think, to some extent. And so I would say one of my largest weaknesses, if I'm not careful, is biting off more than I can chew. Right? That lack of fear or that thinking without fear is awesome in a lot of scenarios. It also can cause a lot of problems if you allow it to. And one of my biggest losses was Spokane was putting in a north-south freeway a few years ago, and in light of putting that freeway in, essentially they had to relocate some houses. And so I bought a bunch of houses at auction and relocated them. So I actually, bought houses, paid a house mover to come and jack the houses up, put them on the back of like basically semi trucks and move them to new locations, and had lots that were ready with utilities. And so that was it all penciled, right? Here's how much the houses cost. Here's how much the lots cost. Here's how much the connections cost. Here's how much the move costs. Here's how much the renovation after the move. Yeah. And it just didn't go as planned. Houses got more damaged in the move than they were supposed to. So the renovation costs were way off. I was looking at the houses set where they were, saying, if I want to bring these to grade A product, 25,000, 30,000. By the time they got there, it was like, no, it's gonna be 55,000. Well, I bought 8. So you blow a budget by 15 or 20 grand on a house, and there's 8 houses. The mover was an experienced mover, but a lot of these houses were being moved to locations that you had to think about other things, disconnect fees, right? Overhead lines. So anytime you go through an intersection, blah, blah, blah. So long story short is, what was supposed to be a scenario where I made about $250,000, and I was going to move these 8 houses, and I was going to make, $20,000 or $30,000 a piece, and Keith's going to make a couple $100,000. Turned into, I had to sell 2 of them, and I held 5 of them. Ended up getting a refinance, turning them into rentals. Got about 60% of my money back. I had to park a couple $100,000 for a few years. Now, fast forward a decade and a half later, they were some of my largest cash flowing rentals that I had. They were making me probably $60,000 a year in net cash flow, because the market appreciated, because rents almost doubled. And why, later on, my bankers or people looking at my portfolio are like, man, this little cluster of 5 houses over here, Keith, on Rebecca Avenue seems to be like a real winner for you. Like, that's awesome. And it's like, well, yeah, but they were a loss leader for me for about 8 years.
I want everyone to hear what Keith just said. So one of the gifts of real estate is time, is the market. And on other episodes, we've talked about losses or mistakes that I've made too, that later, a decade later, all of a sudden I look like a genius. The gift of real estate is time. So if you have the ability to hold long term, like Keith just mentioned, what happens is time can fix your mistakes. I think the problem is when we get over leveraged and we're on a super short time horizon, we don't have cash reserves, and we've got super expensive debt, then we can't let time fix the error. So, brother, I super appreciate you sharing that. One thing that you kind of mention or allude to is risk. So as you're evaluating an investment deal, a land development deal, whatever it may be, how are you looking at limiting that downside risk while maximizing the upside potential? Because I think this is a secret that a lot of investors, they only look at the numbers. They don't look at minimizing the risk while maximizing the return.
Yeah, and I think that's something that you get better at over time, or at least I know I have. Initially, I was not good at it, Anton. I'm being honest. I didn't have anything to lose. A 20-year-old Keith was all grit and all determination, and there was very little downside. Like, well, I'm going to go back to not having a whole lot. Well, that was
Yeah.
18 months ago. That was 2 years ago. So I
That,
didn't
that's
look at
easy. I've been poor before.
it. Yeah. So it was not innate, and I think that risk also comes with, for me, it came with family. It came with investment partners, right? Like, hey, it's one thing to screw something up and for Keith to get wounded or scarred or lose some money. But as soon as I start having business partners in a deal, people who see my success and say, hey, Keith, I would like to do that. Could we invest on something together? And you start getting, it's like, well, they might not have the same appetite for risk that I do, or the same ability to bounce back or the same outlook. And so, as I've gotten older, you obviously have more to lose, and you start having deeper relationships with people that maybe you invest in and this and that. And so it's something now that definitely I look much more closely at. And you also realize that there's always another deal. As a young investor, I was so eager and I didn't see that many deals. And it seemed like there were so few deals coming around that I wanted to just, oh my gosh, this is a deal. You better act now. You better go, because it's going to go away. Someone else is going to buy it. It's not going to be a deal tomorrow. And I think that the calmer, older Keith kind of just knows, like, man, there's always another deal. And not only is there always another deal, but time's limited. And time is a valuable resource. And if I'm working on something, right, if you say yes to something, I'm like inadvertently saying no to other things. No, not only to things that I know about, but even to things that I don't know about. Like, someone could slap a huge deal on my desk in 2 weeks that I've never even seen before, but I'm not going to be prepared to get in on it because I'm committed to this deal today that's marginal or not that great. So you just start to be more selective. And it's about mitigating the risk. I'm looking for deals that, like, the numbers look good, obviously, right? If the numbers don't look good, then what are we talking about? But now if the numbers look good, I'm also asking myself, do I like the deal? Does it fire me up? Am I excited about it? Am I just doing it for the money? Where could it go wrong? And so you start to look at deals differently when you think with abundance. There's always more deals. There's going to be more deals tomorrow and next week. And I should enjoy my life, and I should enjoy what I do. And I shouldn't just be committing to things for the monetary value. I should be committing to them because I'm kind of excited about bringing this product to this community. This development project I'm doing in Garland, this 62 units, it's actually behind me over here on the wall. I'm stoked about it. I love that little community. I love that area. I'm glad to be bringing new construction to that market. There's more about it than just the money. And so you get, gratification from it. And then the risk thing, I think, like I said, is just one of those. I still probably have a pretty high tolerance for risk. And
Yeah.
you find a sounding board. And so for me, one of my sounding boards is like my spouse, my wife.
Yep.
Is because she's like a little, like, she's like immune to what I do, right? Like I think at one point, maybe depressed. Now she's just like, whatever, but she's very grounded, and it's not necessarily about the money, and it's not necessarily, but like, how much stress is this going to put on my husband, right? How much duress are we talking about here? And she's always just been a really good sounding board for me to run something past her and say, hey, it's just kind of on my mind. It's been eating me. What do you think? And she'll be like, oh, don't do it. Like, just tell them you don't want to do it, or, yeah, that sounds really cool. I can tell you're excited about it. So, hats off to her for that.
How do you look at leverage in a deal, and how are you currently using leverage in your investing, land development stuff?
I mean, leverage is, I think, I don't want to say unavoidable, but at some point in time, when I desired to, or when I wanted to do bigger projects and really, like I said, make more of an impact was how I looked at it. Then you're going to be forced to have leverage, whether you're leveraging capital through business partners or relationships, or, one big step for me, I think, was when I finally started to get my real estate portfolio looking well and feeling well, it was like a question of, like, Keith, do you want to leverage your portfolio? Do you want to leverage the equity that's in your portfolio to do additional projects? And you start to have properties that have good equity positions, or you start to have good equity in your portfolio. And that's one of those things, man, I thought kind of hard about, was like, do I keep borrowing private capital? Do I keep working with banks to get bank loans, and not really try to leverage my portfolio? Or do I leverage my portfolio? And I think that's the biggest thing for me, is making sure that if I do leverage my portfolio, that I do it smart, but also weighing out the difference between Keith doing something on his own or through his own leverage versus allowing other people opportunity. And I'm also like an opportunist. Like I like doing things with people. I like watching the agents in my office or some agents that have really worked with me for a long time also having wins. And so sometimes for me, it's a choice to invite other people into a project or an opportunity because I can, and because it would be a cool interaction with them or to win with other people than just to have another solo win. Because I don't get a whole lot out of solo winning. Like when I wake up and tomorrow Keith making an extra buck doesn't really fire Keith up a whole lot. I mean, I do like to make money. I do like to be successful, but I get more out of being successful with others. And so that's brought in that whole new dynamic of, allowing leverage into a lot of deals that maybe isn't even necessary, but allows for opportunity for other people.
And you're speaking to my heart again. It's fun. You're blessing the community. You're blessing friends and family. You're exposing people in your network and people that work with you to opportunities they probably wouldn't normally have access to, where they can passively just easily park capital. And then what happens is over a long period of time, and because time is the great thing in investing, if they're parking capital with you consistently over a long period of time and you're handing them back the return every, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever the cycle is, they turn around and they look at you and go, I can't believe we did this. And I was like, I can't believe that you trusted me at this level. Thank you for playing the game with me. So I feel rewarded by rewarding them too. It's this crazy feedback mechanism. Where I want to go next, man, is because you are a high performer, and a lot of high performers, they listen to this podcast. We all go through cycles. We get burned out. We run out of time, energy. We go through stress. How do you keep yourself motivated? How do you keep yourself in shape to keep pushing through, striving, and then creating that next opportunity?
I first and foremost, man, it's physical. I am a huge fan of physical fitness and staying in shape and staying healthy. And that was something, again, in hindsight, it was all maybe Keith are like, people are like, oh, what a master plan Keith had. It was not. I started training with a trainer in my late 20s, early 30s. I'd been a high school athlete, type thing. And then I kind of let myself go a bit. But once I started getting workouts in and feeling better, I realized that there was a very real, relationship between my energy levels throughout the day and my physical fitness and exercise. So it just became a staple. And now I've just kind of turned it into a lifestyle. I think, it starts with a workout, turns into a habit turns into a lifestyle. And now at 44 years old, I mean, I'm probably kind of a psycho about it, right?
That's an understatement. And you look good too. So let's go through your routine. Like, tell me about your workout routine. Tell me about what you're doing, because you're doing a lot more than most. And what I want everyone to correlate here is our physical performance then turns into business performance, turns into mental performance, turns into the ability to be there for our kids, be there for our team members, be there for our family, our wives. What are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination of two things. I do weight training 3 days a week, typically for like an hour early in the morning. I mean, I'm up at 5:30 in the gym at 6 o'clock, work out from 6 to 7, back home to do breakfast with the kiddos and take my daughter to school. It's typically kind of the lifting days. And then on my off lifting days, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and typically one weekend day, a Saturday or Sunday, I'm rucking. Rucking is, for those people that know what it is, it's a backpack full of heavy weight that you walk around and basically hike with. I think it's like a military term. People talk about like a rucksack. And I got into that when you alluded to this, staying healthy for our businesses and our minds, but also for our families. I had a son, like a true COVID baby. Me and my wife had a baby boy, and I was 40. So I'm currently 44. My son's 3.5. But having that kid really changed my life again for the second time. My daughter did as well, but wanting to stay young. I mean, I love to go hunting and fishing and outdoors and camping and hiking. And I'm like, man, I'm going to be that guy who's got a 15 or 16-year-old little boy with a ton of energy. And if I'm not healthy at 58, 62, 65, they're going to be with somebody else's dad, right? You know, they're going to be out doing what I would love to be doing with them, and I'm not going to be able to keep up. So it was really a motivator for me to pump the brakes on some of the habits that I had, you know, drinking too much or indulging too much, and say, hey man, Keith, let's look at this, man. Let's look at your diet. Let's look at your nutrition. Let's look at your supplements. Let's look at your exercise routine. And I even changed the exercise I was doing. It was primarily a lot more heavy weight prior to that. And I laid off the weights a little bit and went more endurance. But essentially, yeah, I mean, that's the workout regiment. The rucking has led into this weird kind of cult passion of mine. I recently did a ruck race, and that was interesting. I never took my rucking competitively, but ended up doing 58.6 miles in just over 25 hours in a last man standing ruck race. Yeah.
I like how nonchalantly you drop. Yeah, I was carrying a bunch of heavy weight, and I went like 60 miles.
It was actually a buddy of mine I elk hunt with. He like just randomly sent me this link. He's like, "Hey man, this would be cool to get in shape for elk hunting," and it was a last man standing race. I'd never heard about the format. So they essentially put a loop together in like a state park, and you have an hour to complete that loop with a weighted ruck. There's like a 35-pound ruck or whatever, and it didn't seem like that tough. It was like 2.5 miles or something in an hour, which is decent pace. But then the race starts every hour on the hour, so it's like the gun goes off at 8 o'clock. You got an hour, and the only rest you get is from the time that you come in till 9 o'clock, and then it goes off at 9, and then it goes off at 10, and then it goes off at 11. And the race goes until there's only one person left. I was like, well, I'm not going to win, but that would be cool. It would be a good way to stay in shape or get in shape for elk hunting, which was the idea. And my initial goal was to do 12 hours. I thought if I could go from 7 in the morning till 7 at night or whatever, and that would be a marathon. I'd never done a marathon prior to that. I was like, well, it'd be 26 some miles, 12 hours. And I hit that mark. And then I made this arbitrary goal to go to midnight. I was like, well, it'd be cool just to go to midnight, like, turn the headlamp on, yada, yada. And the next thing I know, man, it was down to like 2 or 3 people. And I was like, I got a shot to win this thing. And so I did. I like I said, it was a little over 24 hours, like 25 hours, 58 something miles. I think the longest break I had was like 11 minutes or something. And yeah, the rest is history, I guess. And I'm never doing that again, by the way.
And you were the last man standing. You won.
I was. Yeah.
How many people were in the race?
So there was 2 divisions. There was a running division and a rucking division. And I think total there was about like 30 or 40, but primarily they were runners. So there was like 10 or 12 ruckers, and there was like 30 or 28 runners. The runners did a longer loop. So they didn't carry any weight. And I think they did like a 4-mile loop. Yeah. And the ruckers, I think, did a 2.5-mile loop or 2.4-mile loop. It's not a real popular sport, right? Like it's not. I don't think that rucking is a big thing. And then B, the concept of a last man standing race, I think only appeals to a few people that have some screws loose. Like, right. Like I did it on a whim, but I mean, I think for me, there's something so much different about people going like, hey, could you do a marathon or 50 miles or 100 miles and, take not necessarily as long as you want, but can you do 100 miles in 24 hours or something? But when someone's just like, can you just go until you can't go anymore? Yeah. Most people are like, I'm out. I don't want to do that.
Yeah. I don't want to do that. So you're looking around, your joints hurt, everything hurts. You're probably hungry, probably cold or exhausted. And then you look at your competition. What are you feeling? Or like, how long are you thinking? Like, how far are they going to go? Like, walk me through the last, the last little bit of this.
So Reader's Digest version, it starts, I'll skip like the first, 15, 16 hours, but at some point in time, it's nighttime. They deviate the course a little bit because it was going through a state park, and the state, they didn't want anybody cracking their head open at night or whatever. So towards the evening, they kind of deviate the course a little bit towards more of an out and back. And then when morning comes, they deviate it back to more all in the woods type thing. But at some point in time, it's night, it's about midnight, and there's basically 3 ruckers left. So we're, I don't know, 16, 17, 18 hours in or something like that. And I'm realized I got a shot to win this. And two things happened. Number one is the guy that I was kind of competing directly with, I would say, was a guy named Jerry. And he had previously done one. I think it was like in the Phoenix area. And he had taken second place in that one, but he had completed 77 miles or 76 miles.
Wow.
Or something like that. So divide that by 2.4, 2.5, like, I don't know, it was like 30 some hours, right? I knew this before the race started. So when the race started, I planned on doing, my goal was 12, right? I'm like, it'd be really cool to do a marathon. And so I was like, dude, there's no way. I was like, dude, Jerry, dude, you're going to crush this one, man. Like, he took second on the last night. We were kind of bantering, we're not far off from each other. So after hours and hours and hours, it's like, we're talking about our kids and our families and what got you into the sport. And so it comes down to three people. He's one of them. I, at this point, don't really have a mental belief that like I can necessarily beat this guy. And I don't know that I want to. I have no idea if I can do it. And then there was a gal. Her name was Corey. And she was carrying, it was a little bit lighter ruck. I think the men's division was 35, the women's was 25 or something like that. But she was admittedly crushing both of our times. Like, the time is really irrelevant because it's like, it doesn't, if you come in at 41 minutes, great. You got 19 minutes of rest, but you still got to go again at the top of the hour. And at the advice of a good friend of mine, he was like, dude, don't do that to yourself. He's like, I don't care how fast you can go. He's like, you need your splits to be consistent. So my split times were within like a minute or two. I'm coming in at like 52, 53, 52, 53, 50 on a fast one. But she was crushing us. Like, both me and Jerry were like, dude.
And your ego a little bit.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm coming in, but like to lay on the ground and get like 8 minutes rest. And she's over there like, she's been done for 15 minutes, right? Stop making calls on herself. I don't know what she was doing. But two things happened. So I don't know if I can beat Jerry, and this Corey gal, she's trucking and she's clipping great splits. And we get in the start gate. You have to be back in the start gate at the top of the hour. And we get in the start gate. And so at one point I kind of, I don't know her, so hopefully she never sees this, but I reintroduced myself to her. I was like, hey, I said, I know we met at the very beginning of this. I said, my name's Keith. And she's like, I'm Corey. So we started just having a casual conversation. She says, you ever done this before? I said, no. She says, how you doing? I said, to be honest with you, I said, my lower back is killing me. My feet are freaking killing me. But like, I've well surpassed my goal. My goal was 12 hours. So this is all gravy for me. But I'm like, I'm sticking it through. And I say the same thing to you. I say, have you ever done this? She says, no. I said, how you doing? She goes, I'm doing good. And then I said, I don't remember the next question, but she looks at me right in the face and she goes, but I intend on finishing. And I'm like, well, that's kind of rude. So the way the rules work, it's a last man standing race. So when you look at the scorebooks, it literally, everybody else gets a DNF. You get a did not finish. So every single person has a DNF next to their name. And then the last man standing has, or last woman standing has.
So she's calling you out.
She literally looked me right in the face at like hour 16 or 18. And she's like, my feet are a little sore, but she's like, I intend on finishing. And I'm like, I had taken it first. I was like, it's like, well, you didn't come here to lose? Like, what do you, I don't, so, but it like literally just pissed me off. Like, if I'm just being honest, it just pissed me off. And so I came back in on the next lap, and my crew that had been helping me, my buddy said something, and I was like, well, dude, I don't know if I can beat Jerry, but I'm not quitting until that chick quits. Like, I'm not, like, that's not happening. So she, I think, ancillary just gave me some like spit and vinegar because I was so kind of just perturbed. And like the whole lap, I kept like repeating in my head. I was like, I can't believe she said that to me. Like, she's not going to finish. Right? Like having this psychosis mental conversation.
But you know what?
I intend to finish.
As entrepreneurs, as investors, as business people, whatever keeps the fire burning is where we have to go. Amazing, brother.
Yeah. So she got my fire going. That's for sure. I went from like probably not very competitive Keith to like getting real competitive. And then honestly, another 2-3 laps or whatever she dropped out. And then it was just me and the Jerry guy. And I thought, Keith, you're probably never going to do this again. I'm not having fun right now. I'm 22 hours in or something. So here's your one shot, buddy. Here's your one shot for the glory, to tell your kids a story, for what, whatever, ego, I don't care, but you're here. So I just made a pact to myself, and I said, I won't quit unless I'm injured. Like I'll take an owie, I'll take a bloody toe, I'll take a a skin knee. If I injure myself, that's bad news, because I am passionate about elk hunting, and I did this to elk hunt, and I'm going to be in the mountains in less than a month, and I don't want an injury. Like if I feel like I'm going to get injured, I'm going to need a knee surgery or something like that, then just I'm going to hang it up. But unless I'm injured, or unless I feel like an injury is imminent, like I'm not going to quit, and I'll just see exactly how far I can take it. And top of the 24-hour mark leading into 25, eventually apparently Jerry had some digestive problems. I wasn't able to digest food after about 17, 18 hours. It just kind of starts sticking in your stomach. So I was basically just hydrating, and apparently he was too. And he said, just the stomach started bothering him, and he started getting cramps. And so by the grace of God, so to speak, I won a ruck race.
That's awesome. No, and that's a story. One thing that I think people underestimate when you have children and when you have people in your business, in your life, you'll do more for them. So you finished for them. You finished to set the example. You finished because, hey, this will probably be the only one I will do. And if we use that mindset in life, we can power through so many things. What advice, would you give people just starting out in real estate or starting out as a real estate investor? What should they focus on to get moving with, that type of a mindset, or even just your experience?
And I think that goes back a little bit to the dealing with fear conversation, or thinking without fear. And I just put yourself in a position where you're a little bit nervous, man. Put yourself in a position where maybe you're just not like out over your skis, but you're just, you're keeping your head above water. But I think for me, pushing myself has been a somewhat natural inclination. But what I have encouraged other people to do, agents in my office, friends, other investors, is to adapt a little bit of that same mentality. And that doesn't have to look like someone else's. It can be your own. But I think that living a comfortable life ultimately ends up being living a life of regret. That's just a personal belief I have. I think that as nice as it sounds to live a comfortable existence, at the end of the day, if you know where every meal's coming from, if you're always, comfortable, I think when you look back on your life at some point, whether you're sitting in a nursing home or whatever, you're going to say, you know what, man, I wish I'd have taken a few more adventures. I wish I'd have pushed myself a little bit. And so in the investment world and in the real estate world, like that, what are you doing to feel uncomfortable? So whether you're a brand new agent or a brand new investor, you're just doing your first flip or selling your first house, if you're doing everything you can just to keep up with where you're at, I mean, that might be enough excitement for you. I mean, a brand new agent in the midst of his very first deal, like we've all been there, you probably got more on your plate than you need. But at some point in time, if you find yourself in a rhythm of just the hum ho or the in and the out, or, hey, I got this and I can do transactions, or I can flip houses, or then you should be asking yourself, like, hey, what's the next thing in my life, or the next step for me to like broaden my horizons, push my comfort a little bit. And that's something, like I said, I think I've always done naturally, but I've encouraged a lot of people to do. And when I look around, Anton, my biggest kind of note of sorrow or thing that just kind of gets to me is when I meet agents that have been in the business for 15 years, 20 years, when I meet investors and they still have yet to do it. They still say, Keith, how do you do it? Or, man, I saw this, but I'm thinking about doing it. But it's like, you're always thinking about it. You're always talking about it. But the desire's there, but they just can't take that step or that first hurdle. And it crushes me, man. If just don't, I don't want anybody that I know personally to be in that boat, whether it's a real estate agent who never plays in the game, or even if it's just a friend or a family member who has a 9-to-5 and goes to it every day. And at the end of the year, it's like, are you really just going to rely on your IRA or your 401k and that's it for the rest of your life? Like right now at, 42, what your net worth is going to be at 65. Like to me, it's not a reality for me, but it's hard for me to swallow for other people. I'm like, let's get creative here. Let's push a little bit. And I think that's what I try to be now anymore, is just that light for people. I try to encourage people to push a little bit, to think outside the box and say, hey man, what if it was different? Who cares if you got a 9-to-5 and your salary is what it is and your pay increase? We can still make 70 look a lot different. We can still make 65 look a lot different, but we got to take some risks. We got to do a little bit extra work. We got to push ourselves. So that's always my thing is, there are the time and the place where I see a young or eager agent who gets out over their skis, and I'm like, whoa, let's rein this back. But I would say that is like 1 to 100 of the 99 people that I see that are just not really taking many risks, doing any extra work. And I think for me, it's sad, right? It's sad for me to watch that on the sideline and go, man, I want to help these people so bad, or I want them to want to help themselves. And so many people want to, and they just need a gentle nudge is what I found.
Amen, brother. So in summary, you said, be the light and take the action and do something. Step out there, take a risk, have some fun and live up to your full potential. Keith, how can people get a hold of you, in the Spokane, Idaho area? What's the best way to contact you, sir?
I would say, social media. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, that kind of stuff. So you can definitely just direct message me on there would be great. Otherwise, email keith@509s.com is my email. That's probably the easiest way and probably the most indirect way. So if you send me an email, don't expect a response in 5 minutes, but I would love to hear from you. So Keith@509s or via the socials.
I love it. Thank you for hanging out with me, brother. I appreciate it.
Likewise, man. Appreciate you. Thanks for having me here, Anton.